Buick dealer.
We are in Tel Aviv tonight, the New York City of Israel, where for the first time since the Gulf War in '91, they're being told to be vigilant and listen for warnings based on fears that Hezbollah has missiles that could reach this city. Today, this conflict got more intense. The fighting is fierce here tonight. Israeli airstrikes pounding Lebanon and Hezbollah rockets again reaching far inside Israel. What about the Americans in harm's way? Tonight, the Pentagon's plans to ship thousands out quickly. Also tonight, why the stakes are so high. Israel vows to drive Hezbollah out. What that means for this entire region. And back at home, the heat, triple digits all across the country. Even for July, a dangerous heat wave.
This is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams, reporting tonight from Israel.
And good evening from Tel Aviv, where tonight the people of this city have been told to be aware of the nearest shelter in case those longer-range missiles are fired this way. The Israeli military says if the sirens sound here, that will mean people have 2 minutes or less to seek the nearest shelter. Today, the attacks and counterattacks intensified. Just tonight, a barrage of 40 Hezbollah rockets landed in the port city of Haifa in Israel and the surrounding region. Israel continued to pound Beirut and other suspected Hezbollah locations today and tonight. They've also just announced they're calling up thousands of reserve troops to deal with the situation. Tonight, the first evacuations are getting underway from Lebanon to the island of Cyprus. And on the diplomacy front, a UN delegation meets here in Israel tomorrow morning. For tonight, however, the fighting continues after escalating today. Tonight, our correspondents are in position all across this region, and we'll begin with NBC's Richard Engel in Beirut, the scene of punishing airstrikes today by the Israeli military. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. And those airstrikes are continuing tonight. We have heard and seen and felt them. There have been at least 7 on an area not far from here where today Hezbollah tried but failed to launch the longest range missile in its arsenal.
Lebanon is burning. 50 more Israeli airstrikes today, 600 in the past 6 days. But few areas look as bleak and punished and primeval as South Beirut's Hezbollah stronghold. Israel also attacked Beirut's port and factories, hospitals and bridges across southern Lebanon.
I don't care about rockets. All I care about is that I don't pay the price for somebody else's crime, okay?
As we waited to file a report, we heard an explosion. Israel had attacked a van of Hezbollah fighters trying to launch rockets. But the airstrike set off a rocket. It turned out of control and headed right for us, but fell harmlessly. A close call for us and Israel. U.S. and Israeli intelligence say the rocket was a Zilzal 2, range 60 miles, a 1,200-pound warhead. With all of this today, the British Foreign Office organized the biggest evacuation of its citizens since World War II. And France mobilized as well.
French embassy officials say they don't know exactly how many of their nationals are being evacuated today, but that they will be allowed to come until this ship is full. Now, Americans are increasingly asking when it will be their turn.
At the American University in Beirut, Sarah Johnson from Natchitoches, Louisiana, can't leave her dorm.
You don't even flinch anymore when you hear missiles or sonic booms.
She keeps a blog, a main topic, the U.S. Embassy's slow response.
So far, I'm getting more information from my family back home who are watching the news than from the embassy.
I'm Richard Engel in Beirut. Now to NBC's Martin Fletcher in Haifa in northern Israel.
50 more Katyushas slammed into Israeli cities today. Loud, dangerous, terrifying. Haifa, Israel's 3rd largest town, is getting the worst of it. As we drove into town today,
the people are running. There has been a Katyusha that fell, and there are casualties.
Then, just a few seconds later, half a house destroyed. 6 families live here.
This is what Israel feared, a direct hit on a civilian residence in Haifa.
Most were lucky, only 3 injured. The neighbors, like Gila Galor, traumatized.
I'm really afraid now. Me, I'm scared now, believe me. I have 4 children.
Israel also kept up its relentless attack. In Parliament today, Israel's Prime Minister Ehud Olmert spelled out his conditions for a ceasefire. Hezbollah must free 2 soldiers kidnapped by Hezbollah, stop all rocket attacks, and the Lebanese army must take control of the border with Israel. Until then, he said, Israel will continue with its campaign to destroy Hezbollah. Military analysts say so far Israel's destroyed about 25% of Hezbollah's strength. Hezbollah's rate of launching rockets has gone down from 200 a day to 50 today. But
it's still far from the end, and they still have thousands of Katyushas and dozens of launchers.
Gila is still at risk, but by evening she'd relaxed.
I'm sure we have good luck. We have this synagogue here.
As for her daughter, she's fine too. Military sources say Israel could keep attacking for another week or 10 days. That's how long they think it'll take to cripple Hezbollah. Brian?
And Martin, a question for you before we go back to Richard Engel as well. You have covered so much of the violence here over so many years, Martin. How is this different? Well, I think one has to say here, Brian, that because the whole of the north of Israel is under threat, people have been told to stay in bomb shelters or very close. Summer camps are being cancelled for children. It's a very personal thing here. I think that's what it is. You know, you hear the sirens, you don't know where to go, you've got a minute to take shelter. Suddenly, out of the sky, a rocket falls and smashes into the house or the street nearby you. It's really random death, and it's very scary. But as long as Israelis listen to their government and go to the shelters when they're warned, in that way they are keeping the casualties down, Brian. And Richard, you of course have been stationed for the past several years amid all the violence of Baghdad. You come here to Beirut to see the scenes of this bombing damage, which has been mentioned over and over, now looks like Baghdad. Yes, yet it was just rebuilt. What now for Beirut?
Many people here are frustrated, even the ones who do not support Hezbollah. They are seeing their city, after so many years of reconstruction, now being slowly torn apart. The infrastructure damaged, the airport attacked every single day, the ports attacked. So there is something of a split in opinions here. People are angry at Israel, they're angry at Hezbollah, and they're angry that their country is being destroyed, Brian.
Richard Engel in Beirut, Martin Fletcher in Haifa with us this evening. Now to those Americans in harm's way that Richard just mentioned. A massive evacuation is set to get underway beginning tomorrow. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Jim Miklaszewski on duty at the Pentagon for us tonight. Jim, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. The State Department estimates that as many as 5,000 Americans want to get out of Lebanon and fast. So far, U.S. military helicopters have airlifted only 63 Americans to nearby Cyprus. But to handle the crush of thousands of evacuees, the U.S. has chartered a Greek cruise ship, the Orient Queen, which carries 750 passengers at a time. Helicopter airlifts will also continue. The destroyer USS Gonzales will accompany the cruise ship, and 2,200 Marines aboard the carrier Iwo Jima will arrive within the next few days to provide escorts and protection if needed. Now, military officials warn that this operation does carry some risk, and if the bombing intensifies, the number of Americans wanting out of Lebanon is likely to explode. Brian.
Thanks for that, Jim. Jim Miklaszewski on duty at the Pentagon. President Bush is back home at the White House tonight after wrapping up the G8 summit in Russia with, as you may have heard today, some blunt comments on the Middle East that were captured via an open microphone. As you'd expect, the Middle East overshadowed everything else at that gathering. NBC News Chief White House correspondent David Gregory is with us tonight. And David, what are they saying about this there?
Well, certainly blunt remarks today that really spoke to these issues today, Brian. The president providing this rare unscripted moment, also through those remarks providing a window into his frustration with the diplomatic efforts now to end the violence.
A private luncheon at the G8 Economic Summit in Russia, where leaders chat informally away from the press. Only today, the microphones are on.
8 hours.
And the president isn't holding back. He's heard telling British Prime Minister Tony Blair the United Nations should do more to pressure Syria.
See, the irony is that what they need to do is get Syria to get Hezbollah to stop doing this.
Mr. Bush faults UN Secretary General Kofi Annan for backing a ceasefire before conditions are met and tells Blair Annan should call Syria's leader now. Today, the administration announced that Secretary of State Rice would soon travel to the region amid calls for a peacekeeping force to be deployed along the border of Lebanon and Israel.
The only way, therefore, that this is going to work, whatever we say as the G8, is if we actually give people a reason for ceasing hostilities.
Administration officials were adamant today that conditions must first be met before a ceasefire.
I think you would have a ceasefire in a matter of nanoseconds if Hezbollah and Hamas would release their kidnapped victims and stop engaging in rocket attacks and other acts of terrorism against Israel.
And so it's clear there is no daylight between the U.S. and Israel over what it would take to end the violence. But U.S. officials saying tonight that Israel has been counseled to avoid civilian casualties and the destruction of civilian infrastructure in Lebanon. Brian?
Thanks for that, David. David Gregory on the White House lawn for us tonight. And of course, it isn't as if the situation in Iraq has gone away. 575 miles to the east of here, the vicious sectarian violence continued today in Iraq. Gunmen sprayed a market south of Baghdad with grenade and automatic weapons fire. At least 50 people were killed today, most of them Shiites. It was also a deadly day for the U.S. military. 3 soldiers were told killed in separate incidents. And another tsunami has hit Indonesia, this one triggered by an underwater earthquake. The magnitude of the quake was 7.7, centered in the Indian Ocean, 150 miles off the coast of the Indonesian island of Java. It sent a 6-foot wave crashing into a coastal resort area. Thousands of people escaped to higher ground, but at least 86 people are known dead, and many more are known to be missing. We'll take a break here. When we continue our coverage from Tel Aviv this Monday night, NBC News In Depth, a big picture look at the situation unfolding here in the Middle East. What do both sides in this fight want, and where does it go from here? And later, the epic heat wave going on back home tonight. Every state in the lower 48 hit the 90s again today.
Crisis, and NBC News is there. As the violence escalates, how will it affect us here in America? Reports from around the world on Today, Nightly News, MSNBC, CNBC, and MSNBC.com. The Middle East in crisis. Continuing coverage on NBC News, America's news leader.
Back with you from Tel Aviv, where today here we were given a mostly off-the-record briefing by a high-ranking Israeli general, mostly on Hezbollah and this current military campaign. The general described them as very capable and very dangerous. But what else is known about the other side in this conflict? More tonight in depth from our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell.
As Hezbollah rockets reach farther into Israel,
Hezbollah is the only way to control the terror group and indirectly strike a blow at its chief sponsor, Iran.
The risk, instead of helping Lebanon's government crack down on Hezbollah, Israel's barrage could cause that government to collapse, creating even more danger for Israel. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News at the State Department.
We'll take another break here when Nightly News continues in a moment. Yes, it's July across America, but this is excessive from coast to coast. As we take a look at some of the other stories making news tonight, the embarrassing saga of Boston's Big Dig Highway project just took another turn for the worse. Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney said today testing has exposed weak spots in more than 1,000 places along the Big Dig tunnel system, and all of them will now have to be reinforced. The tests were ordered after huge, heavy ceiling panels fell and killed a passenger last week. A big story on this July evening across the United States is the heat, extreme and dangerous heat, remarkable even for midsummer. As NBC's Kevin Tibbles reports, for many Americans, this meltdown can be a matter of life or death.
Sunup in Chicago, temperatures already in the 80s and climbing fast.
It's tough. You just keep going.
Highway signs warn of excessive heat.
Each day that the severe heat persists brings more danger.
The hot weather has already claimed the life of a 3-year-old South Bend, Indiana boy who accidentally locked himself in a car. Today, every state in the lower 48 except North Dakota hit the 90s. 26 broke 100 degrees and 4 hit 110 or more. From California, where crews continue to battle wildfires, to the plains where crops burn up in triple-digit heat. In Denver, an overheated transformer caused a major power outage at the Museum of Nature and Science.
When the power goes out and we have to close the museum and have to have everybody head out of the museum, it's a huge disruption.
In New York, extreme heat may have caused a subway train to lose power, leaving 70 passengers stranded in the heat for 3 hours. In the Midwest, thunderstorms may bring some relief, but heat alerts remain in effect as Americans chill out.
It's good to get in the water.
Any way they can. Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Chicago.
Checking in on Wall Street, little change there today. The Dow ended up 8 points. NASDAQ rose just 1/3 of a point in the day's trading. And meantime, the national average for regular unleaded gasoline jumped to $2.99 a gallon. That is the highest price per gallon since the post-Katrina period last year. Relief was palpable this morning at the Kennedy Space Center as Space Shuttle Discovery glided in for a smooth landing. It was the first shuttle flight in a year, just the second since the 2003 accident that killed 7 astronauts on the shuttle Columbia. There is late word tonight that Mickey Spillane has died. The legendary Pulp Fiction murder mystery writer splashed onto the American scene with I, the Jury back in 1946. Numerous books and later movies followed. His lead character, always the gritty detective Mike Hammer. He died at his home near Charleston, South Carolina, we're told. Mickey Spillane was 88 years old. 10 years ago tonight, 230 people died when a Paris-bound 747 left New York's John F. Kennedy Airport and then exploded in midair over Long Island Sound. Relatives of the victims gathered today to dedicate a new memorial to their loved ones. On that night 10 years ago, our cable network MSNBC was all of 3 days old. As we go to a break here tonight, here is how the news first broke on the air that night. We have a potentially very serious breaking news story to tell you about. We have received word from the NBC television station in New York, WNBC. They have been told by the United States Coast Guard that a 747 aircraft has exploded. That was the very first bulletin. Later, without the assistance of computer graphics, we had to resort to a road atlas that night to show our viewers where that jet had gone down. We're back with more from Tel Aviv right after this.
Here in the Middle East, it has been a morning of more rocket attacks.
War in the Middle East. There are some 80 Israeli companies that are listed over here on the NASDAQ. Shockwaves on Wall Street.
Oil this morning has been all over the map. Companies here, they're a who's who of technology.
And we're there where it matters to you. When the world markets are on edge, America turns to CNBC.
We are back here in Tel Aviv tonight for a final word on this conflict. This is a modern metropolitan area of close to 2.5 million people, and they've all been told to be on alert in case long-range rockets are launched by Hezbollah. It is a warning this city appears to be taking in stride. This was a Monday workday, for some a Monday beach day in Israel's biggest city, where you wouldn't really know from looking at them that the citizens here have been told to be vigilant. Of course, the people of this city know how to be vigilant. They also insist on keeping their social life. Still, the locals tell us that some of the people you'll find dining out here tonight are from the north of Israel. They've been temporarily displaced from their homes. Life in Tel Aviv goes on. The firing, for now, is still far away, but could come closer. A possibility we discussed tonight with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. This city is Israel's New York. It is believed they may have these long-range missiles. What is the chance we will hear sirens in Tel Aviv?
You could hear it in an hour from now or tomorrow night. But as you mentioned, New York stood up after a very demanding ordeal in 9/11, and America was ready to respond.
And yet the nightclubs are open and the restaurants are open and people are going to work each day.
Yeah, we are tough and resilient people, probably much more than the Hezbollah assessed.
The former Prime Minister of Israel and a decorated military hero, Ehud Barak, on life here in Tel Aviv these days. That is our broadcast for this Monday night. Thank you for being with us. I'm Brian Williams, reporting tonight from Israel. We'll look for you right back here tomorrow night. Good night.